Men, bless them. If you don't need a man to keep you, what do you need him for? As more and more women decide that men are more trouble than children, and that with or without children they'd prefer to manage without a man underfoot or on their backs, men are confused, angry, frightened, even more trouble than they were before. Feminism has been blamed for increasing men's insecurity, but the male ego was always fragile. Women used to put a lot of work into helping men to feel adequate, empowering the penis, I call it. Have they stopped? Have they begun to tell it how it is, how it always was? There was always hostility in the sexual relationship between men and women. Possibly there is in all sexual relationships. Has the hostility now got out of hand? Are heterosexual women hooked on a self-destructive game? To help me decide whether the heterosex game is still worth the candle are 5 heterosexual women: Janet Street Porter, Suzanne Moore, Caitlin Moran, Anne Leslie, and Christina O'Donnell. So first to you, Janet, as the acknowledged expert.
As the acknowledged heterosexual, yes.
Is the game still worth the candle, do you reckon? I mean, I guess it depends how much you think you have to put into it to get a return.
Well, I really like men, but I feel very sorry for them now. I feel that they're bombarded with things that must make them feel very inadequate.
Such as?
Well, I think that the tabloid press in particular over the last few years have really concentrated all their efforts into telling us daily how we should be doing it, how often we should be doing it, different positions to be doing it in. And I think women can cope with this better than men. And I think that women, because women are kind of more, look at this kind of thing in a more intelligent way, we'd look at it and laugh at it and see it for what it is. But I've got this deep down feeling that men probably look at it and feel much more insecure about it. And certainly when they look to what's shown on television, they're portrayed as kind of complete idiots now. All the most successful comedies on television portray men as absolute fools. I mean, in Absolutely Fabulous, they're not even there. In the British Empire, he's a complete twerp. In One Foot in the Grave, he's a ranting, powerless man. A retired person who's just feels he's losing the plot. And in, what's the other one, Keeping Up Appearances, he's a henpecked husband. These are the most popular comedies on television, and their men are laughingstocks.
Yeah, but I think in a way that always was the case, because I Love Lucy and all those kind of comedies, they always showed the man as being the idiot. But in the sense that those comedies, what they were saying to women was, the chaps are out there, their kingdom is outside the home, and you are the queen of the kitchen, and you can't let the chaps in because they can't do anything like that.
It's still Dagwood, isn't it?
Yeah, but it didn't matter then in a way, because men had the knowledge, they had the economic power in the outside world, but they don't. Increasingly, they don't now. I mean, when you look, 80% of the new jobs are all going to women. There's more employment now among women in the younger age group, 16 to 19. And I think women, it's sort of almost saying to men, what are you for? What's the point of you?
It's one thing to feel sorry for individual men, or to feel sorry for the way that men are portrayed on television. And it's another thing to read the statistics about, men as a group, as compared to women as a group, how much men earn. Women earn 75p for every pound that a man earns. Women live in fear of rape. I mean, I hate to go through all these things, but, it's easy to laugh at these pathetic men on television or read the tabloids and say, oh dear, it's hard on men now because they have to perform a little bit more, just like women always have had to perform. But I wouldn't waste my sympathy, actually.
I'm just wondering, do men really have to perform anymore? I mean, it's true that there is what I call the penetration agenda, and the assumption is that you've got to be able to do it whenever and adequately and so on and so forth, which applies now across the board. It applies to homosexual relationships as well. I agree with you there. There is something sinister going on here that makes everybody feel inadequate. But is that really different from the way that women felt inadequate because they were supposed to have all these attractions that they couldn't have?
Absolutely, and I think that what women are now facing is the fertility buff, which is women of my age, in their 30s, who are not yet married, who have not yet reproduced, feel themselves suddenly on the spot because, hey, what are you doing? Why aren't you having children? Why aren't you being part of the whole fertility game? And I think that just as men might be the victims of tabloid journalists saying, how many times can you do it? We women are finding ourselves the victims of this, so where are the children? Where are you, where are you doing it?
I don't know, I mean, there's one thing I wanted to pick you up on there, where you were saying before that women are getting, 75% of the new jobs. I think, in a way, 80%. I think, in a way, women are lucky because of that, because there is a pressure on us to be perfect, where there isn't this pressure on men, so they sort of, like, lean back and go, oh, it's okay, I'm going to slob out, I'm just going to take these things as they come. Whereas with women, there is a pressure to be amazingly successful at your job, and hold down a steady relationship, and look really gorgeous, and be amazingly good in bed, and be able to knock up a meal in 10 seconds with some toast and some beans. And in that way, it means that we're going to be able to move on forward. There isn't this pressure on men to evolve anymore. I think women are evolving much faster than men.
Well, that's exactly why men can now talk about being the victims. I mean, look at Prince Charles versus Lady Di, or Princess Di. I mean, everybody was behind Princess Di while they were part of the couple, but once she walked away from that marriage, he became the victim. And the Harding Bienvenida thing, everybody was supposed to be sympathetic towards him. Men as the victim. It's the David Thomas, Neil Linden scenario. And I just, I think that that's very insidious.
But that's just a sign of the different expectations. I mean, I think that while a lot of things haven't changed, I mean, what has changed is women's expectations. I mean, if you're worried about having children and you only want children within, a marriage, yeah, you are going to have a hard time, I think. I mean,
you have more chance, apparently, of being killed in a terrorist attack than of getting married for the first time over the age of 30, according to a cover story in Newsweek.
I hope
yes,
my parents
but isn't that
don't
one
know
of the
that.
backlash myths? And if you actually research that,
Yes,
that's
true.
not true.
I hope it's
that
not
is a
true.
myth.
Well, at least I hope it's not true. I don't really care whether people get married or not. But
Germaine, you see, you don't really care, but where I feel slightly sorry for men is they're very sort of literal, straightforward chaps, and they used to have a nice long-term view, which was they sowed their wild oats with the lads down the pub when they were young, then they married the girl next door, had some kids, they had a job in the car factory for life, and they were breadwinners. Simple. Now, of course, they find that women are beginning to wonder, what is the point of this sex at all, except for impregnation purposes? You go to housing estates where 70% of the men have no jobs. The jobs are with the women, if at all. The women don't want these unemployed, unemployable oafs around. They prefer to marry the state because the state's very mean, we know that, but the state doesn't beat you up. The state doesn't expect you to wash its socks. The state doesn't drink all the housekeeping money or, stack the fridge with Carling Black Label.
I have no
and there are a
problem with that,
whole lot
actually.
of men roaming around, becoming permanently puerile teenagers, sowing their wild oats because they have no long-term perspective of what point they have in this existence.
And all these
I
women
think
want...
there is a problem that men don't want to grow up, and that's really something you see really graphically illustrated now, that there's more and more men who don't want to ever grow up.
The Peter Pan syndrome.
And yes, I mean, it's been called the Peter Pan syndrome, and I don't know quite how it's come about. And it's all, it would be awful to blame their mothers, but I mean, I've been married 3 times, and it's this bond that men have with their mothers, and it's just absolutely fascinating. And, as you kind of move into this relationship with their mother when you're a girlfriend, and then you're a wife, and then when you're the ex-wife, it changes again. But you never notice these men ever really grow up throughout that process. They're all sort of stuck at a certain age.
But their mothers thought the same thing. I mean, it's part of women's wisdom to say men will be boys. They're boys all their lives. They play games all their lives. They watch football all their lives. They never get tired of these puerile things. If they put the same energy into something productive as they put into remembering who kicked what goal, when and where and after which particular interchange, we'd be
I
ahead
kind of like that about them, you see. I just can't condemn them outright for being dreary. I think that, I must confess I've lived with men all my life, ever since I left school. I don't think I've ever lived alone. And I kind of think, OK, that men are going to not do very much around the house. They're going to be like this. They've always been like this.
But
what's so bad about that? As long as I'm happy with it.
Settling for very little. I mean, why should people settle for little? I mean, and if you're talking about marriage, as an institution, I mean, it's better for men than it is for women. Women get ill, they get depressed in marriage. Men sort of flourish in marriage, And it's all these institutions, I think, that have worked to the benefit of men that women are now rejecting. They're saying, why should I hook myself up with somebody who can't even provide for me? Because they still expect those other things in return, to look after the house and do the cooking. And it's easier now for a lot of women to actually be on their own and to make kind of networks with other women, especially if you have children.
But I feel as people are still getting married, they might be getting married later.
But they're getting divorced more
I
and
know,
more.
but it's interesting that they are still getting married. Less people are not getting married. People are still getting married at roughly the same rate. And I think that what that shows you is that I agree with what Anna said, that a lot of people would prefer to marry the state, but for a large number of people in this country, they want some form of companionship.
But it's not a choice, do I marry this individual man or the state? I mean, the majority of single parents end up with no other means to survive. I think this is a kind of, you know, Tory kind of propaganda that
totally.
you know, well, I need a council house, I'll get pregnant. I mean, there might be the odd girl that happens to, but on the whole, I mean, most people are in relationships and they fail and they end up on their own.
Yeah,
but
I just want to come on this because I'm being accused of being fractly Tory. The fact is, I'm not actually criticising these women.
Yeah.
I think
It makes
they have
sense.
made a very sound decision. As I say, I mean, if they've got a choice between marrying some of these frightful hulks that hang around at street corners and marrying the Social Security, I would choose the Social Security as well. It won't pay well, but I don't blame them at all. They've made a good market decision.
There's a corollary to what Janet was saying, which is that it is true that people are still getting married, but what is undeniable is that the duration of marriage is decreasing at a faster
There's nothing
rate.
wrong in that. You haven't failed. It's just run its term.
I didn't say fail. I said duration.
I know, but I get really mad when I read about divorce being written about as some kind of failure, and I think we've really got to change the way we think about marriage and divorce. I think that marriage is making a commitment and you give it your best shot, and when it fails or breaks down, it's not like failing a major examination. You just move on through another stage in your life. And
well, I think that I have to hold a bit of the moral line. I think that marriage is not just a game. I think it is not just giving it your best shot. I think that at some point, we women, as we hope they, the men, are going to talk about compromise, and we're going to talk about, look, this is the future of society is all about reshaping, restructuring, reworking the present world order. So why not start with marriage? Okay, marriage is a very different institution from the one that our grandparents knew about and centuries ago. It is a much longer contract because of life expectancy. It is a much longer contract and a much more difficult one because before we could rely on extended families to support us, to underpin the marriage. But at the same time, we all have to realize that we can't just think about me, myself, and I. We've got to start thinking about community. And I think that what was wonderful about the female liberation that Germaine was one of the pioneers of, and who, Germaine was there, the general leading the campaign. The campaign was all about iconoclasm, about ripping asunder a world order in both its social and sexual arena. And that was great. But now the time has come to construct, not to destroy. And I think construction means looking around, being horizontal, not just looking at yourself.
Well, can
not
I just say, you live in a dream world, because the whole point of what Germaine and people... Well, I'm only slightly younger than Germaine, so I feel that very close to what happened. I feel that what happened was that there was a generation of women born after the war who felt very distant from their parents. And it's all very well to talk about, marriage being a compromise and reconstructing it. It's hard to know where to start when, for our generation, our friends are closer than our family, and since the 60s, one has seen, succeeding generations of women have much closer relationships with their other women friends than with either their husbands or lovers or family.
Well, I'd like to ask Anne a question, though, because Anne is the one of us who has been married to the same man for 22 years.
25.
25 years, my God.
I know, I'm a freak. You see, everybody says, my God.
Well, I want to ask you, though, you see, the thing is, it seems to me at a certain point you say to yourself, I am going to make this work. I'm going to put enough energy into it to make it work. And it's a commitment that you make. And I want to ask a question which is almost impossible to answer, but I'd like you to try, which is, do you really feel that the investment of energy and time and tolerance and adaptation of your own personality that was involved in making sure that all the changes that happened to you and your husband in the relationship did not break it or shake it? Is the sum of your marriage more than the two parts that have gone to make it up?
Yeah, I think so. I think apart from anything else, I do hate people talking about marriage when they say working at it, as if you're sort of chipping stones in the prison quarry. You know, I mean, if it was chipping stones in the prison quarry, I wouldn't be doing it. You know, I mean, I actually enjoy being married. I like it. I like the support system, the emotional and other support systems I get from marriage. I like having a family. I also think once you've got children, you cannot go on treating marriage as a game. I really don't. I think once you've got somebody else involved, you have to think differently. I think every marriage goes through that sort of point where you think, God, I wouldn't mind a divorce, but, you know, it's so complicated. If only you'd meant just bringing up John Lewis Removal Company. But, you know, it's not just a question of, you know, whose cushions belong to who, but it's all that shared language that you have all those kind of things where you can just say, old muggins, which is a phrase we have which describes the type of person which would take 40 minutes to describe to anybody else. All of that. And I love being married, and I fully intend to remain so for the next 25 years if the facts don't get me. But I also see why other people don't want to be married. And I look at my daughter's generation. She's 15. And they're all strutting around, you know, Doc Martens and being very assertive. Exactly. And that's just the girls. And they're talking about pulling guys and things.
But what's wrong with that?
That's fine. But what I do slightly worry about is when I notice her boyfriends or the friends in her, the boys in her circle, these lumpish, oafish creatures shamble into the house. The girls have to do all the organising. The girls are now so assertive. It's not just Doc Martens on their feet. It's Doc Martens up there. They are the ones who organise everything. These oafs stand around saying, what have you fixed for tonight? Now, my daughter's generation is going to go on wondering,
but that's
what
a function of their age.
No,
I mean, boys of 16, 17 are like
yes,
that.
but when we were 16 and 17, we sat around waiting for them to make the decisions, waiting for them to ask us out.
Waiting for the phone to ring is what we said.
Waiting for the phone to ring. The point was that we, in a way, forced them to stop being so passive, lazy and hopeless, because otherwise social life wouldn't have got going. Now, they're being allowed to be absolutely oafish and hopeless because the women are taking over.
Well, there's two things I would say here. First of all, men seem to be split up into two different groups. There's the stupid ones who are just very concerned about being men, and they will go around and they'll kick empty beer cans across the streets, and they will go to the football, and they'll sweat and they won't do anything about it. And then there's the other sort who sort of bought into the whole thing that men should be more in touch with their female side, and they're very frail and they're very girly, and they'll spend more time doing their hair than you, and they make you moisturiser, and they usually need about 15 years of psychotherapy in order just to kiss and touch tongues without having a trauma about it afterwards. And you get these two kinds, and if you get the stupid ones, it's like, I'd like to be able to talk to you on some level, and then if you get the ones that are really girly, it's like, well, no, I really did actually want a man, or else I would have been a lesbian.
This is it, Kat, and you're moving the goalpost. No wonder they're so confused. They don't know whether they should be putting on their Timberland shoes and rushing off into the forest and kissing trees and crying for lost daddies, all that Iron John rubbish, or whether they should be being sort of big, macho husband.
It's not that, it's just what women should be, which is confident, straightforward about their sexual needs and able to talk about what they feel.
Suzanne is bursting to say something.
I get, you know, why do we have to worry so much about what men are like? I mean, it's clear that
we have to share the world.
In evolutionary terms, they're behind, and that's all there is to it. We all sort of agree on that. So, I mean, I just have all these conversations all the time where people sit around saying, oh, why can't I get one like that or one like this? And I really do feel that, you know, women should, you know, cut their losses at some point. And they are.
And what, reject half
yes.
humanity?
No, but wait a minute. This is exactly what the subject is here. The subject is whether or not men are worth the effort that we put into them. Now, we're making it sound like we don't put any effort into them at all, but we do. I mean, I'm sure there's nobody here who puts on her who gets up an hour before the man in her life to put her makeup on. But
yeah, we go to bed in it.
Yeah. Well, that's also. But I was just thinking. I was trying to think of a question that would really show the difference about the vulnerability of one sex to the other, because this concerns me. And I was thinking, for example, how many of us would fart when there was a man in the bed?
Well, that's it. If you've been married for 25 years, that's one of the great things about being married for 25 years. You can do anything. It's total acceptance.
Well, again, I don't have that problem because we play music so loud when we're in bed, you don't hear it, so it's not really that much
There's more to it than hearing it, child.
Not if you're just lying very still. But I've always noticed in relationships there's
Do
always
you know
one
that there are
person-
men out there who believe that women don't fart? Because women have been so self-sacrificing in this regard, and I have never known a man who was self-sacrificing in this regard. They let rip wherever.
Do you think this is why women go out and cook for their men so they can go and fart in the kitchen while he's lying in bed? I mean, do you think this is the
Or
reason?
go out and walk the dog or put the milk bottles out or whatever.
I find that very
Janet?
odd.
Yeah, it's true. But it's not something
What's
that-
true?
And men fart all the time. Men fart and women pretend they don't. But we also pretend we don't because we want to put one over on them and be superior.
That is the thing. That is
I
the
actually
thing.
feel
In
fantastically
relationships.
superior, the fact that I don't.
That's the thing, in relationships, men always think that they're making all the running and that they're chatting you up and they're seducing you, but it's the woman just bringing them on with just subtle gestures and eye movements. Always in a seduction scene, the woman has the power.
Yeah, but separate out, look, let's separate out this seductive power that women have always had from, you know, the average life of the ordinary woman who doesn't have much power and has a pretty sort of shit existence with a guy. She has to go home, service him, do her part-time job, come home, look after the kids. And you know what, you know, I am concerned with power, and I want more power than just being able to pick up a guy by, you know, batting my eyelashes. I mean, I want to know that my daughters, you know, will be able to walk into whatever job they want and will have, you know, will earn as much as a man. I mean, all these very basic things. I mean, we're just confusing the kind of very superficial power that women have always had and had to have to just survive with, you know, power in the world.
But
you know.
Suzanne, you're beginning to talk in a rather old-fashioned kind of 70s way, because
It is
it seems to me...
old-fashioned.
No, but the point is that I think that the economic balance, particularly in the Western world, is moving inexorably towards women's employment, because we're willing to take part-time jobs, we're willing to do so-called women's jobs, you know, light industrial factory work.
We'll do all the crap stuff that men won't do.
No, yes, but the point is, it's better to have two jobs, i.e. looking after the children and working in the light industrial thing, than no job at all. What worries me is that we are gradually going to be acquiring, not yet, but we are gradually going to acquire more economic power. And men who will be seen as more and more useless. They've got all that raging testosterone around. I mean, when women are feeling useless, they kill themselves or have more babies. When men feel useless, they go around, you know, smashing cars or whatever. I think we're building up an actually quite a dangerous group
But, I mean,
of
it's
people
not
who
women-
feel powerless
But
and
it's
very
not women
angry.
who have created this. Is I agree with you. It's the economy. You know, there's a decline in jobs, full-time jobs for men, a rise in part-time jobs for women, and we're all going to have to live with this situation.
No, we don't have to live with it. I think that this is where I'm very surprised at everybody. We're the ones who vote people into power. And why not rework the workplace? Why not have employment feature children, meaning either they have a creche in the business place, or they start, okay, everybody's talking about unemployment and how we should cut down the work week to 4 days instead of 5. Why not cut down the work day so that it reflects school hours, so that
But this is
people
not what-
suddenly
No,
understand?
that's
We
not-
work
we're
longer
not-
hours
you're
than
not
anyone else
talking
in
about
the
the
world.
male
Suzanne, maybe we
unemployment,
could
which
start
is-
working from within and starting to, you know, if
Christina,
women
but this
take-
is taking us away from our topic in a sense. I mean, I think the important thing to realise here is that the incumbents in power change, but the power itself doesn't change. And the system we have cannot deliver justice in the workplace.
I agree
What has
that the
actually
system doesn't
happened
deliver.
is that as Labour has lost power, women have entered the labour force. The two things happened at the same time. But it would take us... I'm still hooked on this whole problem of the men in our lives and what we do for them. Now, one of the things that has always struck me, and it strikes me more and more with my godchildren, is that women remain vulnerable to men in a way that men in a relationship are not vulnerable to women. That men can do a thing that I call withdrawal of tenderness. You don't toe the line, you don't do the thing they want you to do, and they just, down comes the invisible shutter,
Oh, but
and
I
you
withdraw
can't get
tenderness
near
as a
them.
blackmail option of all
We
the
all
time.
play those
We
games.
all play those games. It's not
I've
a
never
male
been able
prerogative.
to do it. It's always been obvious that I was get-atable. I could be talked around. But the men in my life could shut me out in such a way that I got panic-stricken I would be desperate. I would apologise. I would change behaviour.
Germaine, that's an individual, not a gender.
I would watch football.
equality.
How much football?
I don't understand this though. I mean, I don't understand. Women have the ultimate power. We raise the children. Ultimately, it comes down to women to raise children, infuse in their little empty minds how they're going to be. And within a generation, we could have changed how everything is. Your generation could have changed the men that I'm going out with now.
We did. We made them stupid. And what was the other thing?
Thanks.
And
Well, thanks.
But that is quite interesting. And as an Italian, I thought that this was just particular to the macho culture in Italy. You know, while they were feeding you pasta, mommy was saying to the boys, and you're number one, and you are always going to be number one, and she's going to be your slave. But what is very interesting is that I found the same kind of mentality in America, and I'm finding it again in England. So what is it about mothers that is allowing these men to have very fragile egos which require constant, endless praise, and a vanity that is this big?
We can't just talk about mothers that are isolated from the rest of what's going on.
No, but let's talk about them a bit. I mean, it is simply true that people treat boy babies and girl babies differently, and what is interesting is they treat them differently even if they've got the wrong ones. If you tell them a gender, they will. Baby boys get picked up as soon as they cry. Little girls are left to cry longer. Baby boys are fed more often, and so on. This is, I'm still trying to find out about heterosexual women and their relationships, and I want to ask Janet, because she's been silent for a bit. I want to ask Janet if she really thinks, well, I want everybody to think about this, because I realise reading my daily paper that there are things about men that I am completely mystified about, and I've lived with them, slept with them all my life. Do you think that your fantasies, and your amorous fantasies in particular, coincide with your male partner's fantasies at all? Are you actually in the same universe, even when you're making love?
I'm completely selfish. Always have been. None of the men that I've ever been with have got anything in common with any of the others. And when I'm with them, I'm completely selfish.
Does that mean you're not interested in their fantasies at all?
Not really, no.
You would never say to them at a crucial moment, what are you thinking of? It's a very dangerous question.
I wouldn't ask it because it is a dangerous question.
Meaning?
I wouldn't want to hear the answer in case I wasn't part, because I haven't got that confidence, because I think, like a lot of very successful women, you're completely schizophrenic, that you present a very confident persona to the outside world and at work because you have to, but in your private life you're completely different. That doesn't mean to say you just go out and, you know, go for whoever fancies you, but it means that in your relationship I have a different persona. To succeed, to be a woman working in an industry dominated by men, you have to adopt some male characteristics, and you have to protect what it is about yourself.
I don't think selfishness...
All I'm saying is that I have quite a strongly developed sense of my own worth, and I don't want men to get too close.
I think other women police women in a way that men don't. I mean, if you go out with women, they say, did you see what she had on? Oh, my God, that looks so tarty, or whatever. And men haven't even noticed, you know. And I think that there's a lot of sort of, if you like, another old-fashioned word, oppression that comes from other women.
But I think that the idea about women having a kind of thought police for other women is kind of rooted in the insecurity. I think that men can afford to be more generous because they're more self-confident. I mean, when I'm feeling happy about myself, I'm at my nicest. And I think that, again, it goes back to this very different self-worth understanding that men have vis-a-vis women. Why are men so
There's also the question that men give it to each other. That men have a kind of non-challenging, rubbing along, recreational style together. They don't expect relationships to be intense or perceptive or probing.
Intensity
and women haven't
is a
learned
big difference,
this.
actually.
Women haven't learnt this skill in the workplace. To
I think
mess
they're
about.
learning it more. I think they're learning it more and more, though.
But you know, when Germaine was talking about the withdrawal of affection, like in relationships and in the family, that's what happens at work too, because I think when women at work are much more demonstrative and straightforward, and men have a strange Masonic code of rituals and gestures that other men read really well and women misinterpret, and because we're just more straightforward.
It seems to me that this, what I'm driving at is that there really is an asymmetry between men and women in relationships, and that they really don't fit together very well. And that, in fact, you need something Christina talked about, which is the buttress of the extended family that holds the fissioning couple together, whether they want to be together or not, so that they find ways of tolerating each other, which is all that most people can hope for.
But I mean, the
That
whole
sounds
issue...
like a nightmare scenario to me, I must say. The idea of having some bloody extended family making me stay... Oh, hideous! Completely hideous.
They come in very handy when you've got children.
No, the only... I now speak to my sister once a week on the telephone, and we get on really well. But we get on like that. We've worked out our own relationship. The idea of letting people into my marriage to help sort it out would be so hideous. I mean, I telephoned my mother after I got married the second time, told her I got married in the morning, and her comment was, well, can you make your birthday present do for a wedding present, because it's getting embarrassing now.
But Janet, when you say that, is that why you haven't had children? Because you didn't want to introduce them into the relationship?
No, I think I didn't have children because I was too busy working, and I really like work. There's nothing wrong with work. It's really fabulous, you know. You earn lots of money, you know. You go and...
Some people do.
Well, I
You're
know
not
some
swinging out
people
anywhere.
do, but I've been very lucky because from when I started in Fleet Street when I was 20 to now, I've never been out of work. So I have a sister who works really hard, who doesn't earn very much money, and she works in Sainsbury's, and that's my reality, and my brother-in-law's unemployed, and that's my reality too. And I think that in a marriage, to save my marriages and to keep them going, my husbands and I knew when they were over, it was mutual. We didn't want anyone else involved. Nobody could have saved them.
But Germaine, when you talk about men leaving more than women do, in a sense, leaving relationships, leaving children, it's simply not true. I think 65% now of divorces are instigated by women. And in fact, of the single-parent families or lone-parent families in this country, the never-married mother has now surpassed the single and the divorced one. So, in a sense, the leaving, it's the disposability of men that is a difference. I think that's what's happened. But that women didn't leave before because they didn't have an option, because they didn't have any other possibility of either earning money or getting it from the state or anything else, and they had to stay in marriages and the man left. Now they have an option, and they don't have to have the child. They can have an abortion.
I don't think it's just that. I think in all relationships, the way that relationships work is working out what your position is and what you do. And once you define those roles, that's how it goes. But as women are evolving more than men, and as you go through each period of your life, you'd say, oh, now I'm a career woman, now I'm a career woman and a very sexy person, now I'm a career woman and a sexy person, and I have children, and now I have a relationship as well, and now I'm still being really good in the kitchen and in the bed. But men don't have that kind of evolution because they are immediately into a career, and that's how they are. And that's why relationships break up, because women are evolving much faster than men.
I think
and if you can find a man that keeps up, hold on to him.
But the expectations of being, you know, sexy, having a fantastic job, having the children and the relationship. I mean, well, Anne's done it, but I mean, it's bloody hard work, and it's you know, driving women into the ground in a way that I don't see.
But we asked for it. We wanted it.
I think that
we wanted it all.
You know, that having it all thing is actually it's very, very difficult, and it. You know, men seem to have a little bits of it and then move on to the next thing and have a bit more of something else. And women, you know, are sort of killing themselves to I think perhaps sometimes women have to make a choice, actually, about, you know, the career, the children and the relationship. I mean, I personally find it hard to have all three.
Well, they used to have to make a very hard decision.
Really.
I
think that Kate is right. Women evolve, and also as you evolve, you change your priorities. And things that seemed so important to you last year, you know, maybe your relationship was really important to you last year, and this year
It's work,
it's work. It just has to be, and we just have to be single-minded. And I do think this idea of having it all has horribly backfired, because once you've had a taste of having it all, it's like a drug. It's really hard to give it up.
I just wish we'd all stop whinging, really. I never thought there was any such thing as a free lunch. Nothing's for nothing. You gain in one aspect and you lose in another. No revolution, whether political or industrial or social or whatever, comes without cost, either to the losers or to the winners. I think feminism did make us more capable of being winners, but it also imposed on us certain burdens. We asked for those burdens. We wanted it all. We're finding a bit much now. But come on, get a life, stop getting
Let's get back to this
moaning.
question of relationships, though. You see, it seems to me that heterosex has become almost a perversion. And we still stuck with it. We still fancy men, and we still take risks with men. Mr. Goodbar is still out there, and women are still looking for him. Do you still fancy men?
I still fancy men, and I sit around and try and... Because I've got children, and I've got a job. And so I try to boil down what it is I want from men, and I've worked it out now.
Have you got a shopping list?
Yeah. It's sex.
Yep.
And the kind of intimacy that goes with sex that you don't have from your female friends, and DIY.
Well, the thing is...
Well,
I
I
can tell you what
never
I
want DIY because you can just buy it
Well,
more
that's right.
efficiently.
I'm now in the
Why
position
have a
where-
man who can do
I'm
DIY?
now in a position where I can pay for it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't before. And so now it's
You're
dawning on me that I'm
helping
going to have to
the
pay
male
for it.
unemployment problem by employing them to do your
But,
DIY.
that's a kind of puzzling answer, because it means that you fancy men for sex and not women for sex. But I suppose it's going too far to say what is it you like about sex with men in particular, because perhaps you haven't had the other thought.
Well, I have, but I basically like to be with a man.
I think the thing...
Why? That's the question that intrigues me.
I like difference. I like sexual difference.
Yeah.
I like to be in bed with somebody who is different to me physically. I find that exciting in a way that I don't find with women. So I'm basically heterosexual. That's how I know I'm heterosexual, I think, because I actually like the difference and I enjoy the difference.
Well, I try and work it out in terms of, pheromones and signs and signals, because I think they're sub-rational, they're even irrational. It is a bit crazy. Kathleen, what about you?
I think in most relationships, it's almost a battle to make the other person happier, especially in sex. It's kind of like, I'm going to do this, no, but I'm going to do this, but no, I'm going to do this, and it's almost a battle to make the other person
It's getting
happier.
better by the sounds of things. It wasn't like that when I was playing around with that kind
Well,
of
that's the
stuff.
thing. I mean, some of the arguments that have been going around at the table today, I haven't understood because it is very much different now.
You would make love to women as well?
I have in the past, yes.
But you didn't like it as much, or you...
No, I felt uncomfortable with it because I do enjoy something other. Because I know my own body. I mean, it was almost like making love to myself, which I didn't really want at the time. But I can do it in an emergency, but I would prefer to be making love to someone else.
What is it you fancy about men?
I think it is that on one level, on the physical level, it's instinct. Everything about me, if I think that somebody's attractive, goes for it. I mean, physically. But then, intellectually, it's that kind of danger, mystery, that otherness. And I think that the two together are pretty irresistible.
Janet, can you imagine a life without a man in it?
No, not at all. Not at all. And my best friends are women, and I go on holiday with my girlfriends. And year before last, I went trekking in the Himalayas for 3 weeks with my best girlfriend. We had separate tents because we're not that. Because I think you need to have space, and also I'm very messy and she's very tidy. But she's absolutely very, very closer than my husband's have been to me. But I really have enjoyed all my relationships. I think I'm unusual in that I'm on very, very close terms with all my husbands and all my ex-boyfriends, and I talk to them all the time. They write to me if they're abroad. We see each other. We even go on holiday together. And I think that if they were great enough to go out with in the first place, they're great enough to know. I don't somehow write them off. I think they're all part of my life, and they all kind of fit together as a jigsaw. And also, if you look at all of them, it tells you a lot about me. It probably tells you some things about me I don't want you to know, but if you look at them all together. But I think that what attracts me to all of them was there was something about them that I couldn't possess.
Well, somehow I think, despite all my attempts to demolish it, the institution of heterosex is here to stay. But the problems, I think, will not have gone away, despite our contributions. I'm very interested on Kathleen's view of the sexuality of 21st century women. I think it sounds as if she's going to have a much better time than I did. It just remains for me to thank you all. Thank you, Janet Street-Porter, Christina Odone, Anne Leslie, Kathleen Moran, and Suzanne Moore. That's all we have time for. Good night.